We use our voice, we use our language as a way to project who we are and our identities. When it comes to stuttering, the person who stutters isn't entirely in control of how people perceive them. So the identity is left up to the kind of in the ear of the beholder, the ear of the listener. And so there might be times when a person who stutters, their own social identity is at odds with the way people are perceiving them.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering. My name is Greg O'Grady, and I am a person who stutters and a co-host of Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering, along with my co-hosts.
And my name is Katelyn Mayo. I'm a future speech-language pathology student, and I'm Greg's co-host on this podcast.
Some Stutter Law mission is dismantling and rebuilding stuttering. Let's start listening. Some Stutter mandate is in the spirit of Newfoundland and Labrador humor, robust and frank interactive discussions. Some Stutter Law podcast aims to rebuild confidence and hope for today's and tomorrow's person who happens to stutter by dismantling stuttering myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers.
The objectives of Some Stutter Law podcast are supporting, raising awareness, and increasing understanding and acceptance of stuttering, providing people who stutter, their families, professionals, students, and the general public with current information, research, and resources about stuttering, and promoting advocacy and support for people who stutter.
After a successful launch in season, it's time for a well-deserved Some Stutter Law break. This week's episode is the season finale of the first season of Some Stutter Law, where the podcast team will talk about where the podcast's been and where we're going. We're joined by Dr. Paul DeDecker and Luca Dinu, who are both members of our production team. Dr. DeDecker will provide us with a status update on the various projects that the NLSA Solidarity Collaborative Project is working on and to share any highlights in Some Stutter Law in this past season. Paul, could you provide us a status update on the various projects being worked on?
So we had a number of projects on our plate this year. So the first one was something we called the science of stuttering, and that was a project to develop an open education resource that would be available online for students to use, educators to implement into their courses. But the idea behind it is that it would explain what stuttering is. And kind of outline the history of research that's been done on stuttering. So from a student point of view, it would take you into some of the early days of stuttering research and stuttering treatments as well, up to current day methods and theories about what stuttering is, including the genetic components of stuttering, and so this would be a piece of an educational resource that's available free for anyone to use online. And the cool thing about this is that it was funded by the Atlantic Open Education Resource Grant. The cool thing is that this project was funded. We had some money to hire a student to carry this out, and it was funded by the Canadian Association of University Libraries. So a tip of the hat to that association. Thank you for the funds. And so this will be something that's ongoing for the rest of this year, rest of 2021, and I'll be implementing it into my classes when I go back to teaching in winter 2022. So that's a cool project that we've got a good start on, and hopefully we'll finish up within the course of the next few months. On to project number 2. The second study that we wanted to get it started on this year was the Stuttering and Sociolinguistic Identity project. So this was a look at people who stutter at various stages in their life, a younger group compared to an older group, and we would look for the lived experiences that people who stutter, younger people who stutter, and older people who stutter go through and experience as they navigate the world well, with a stutter. And so we didn't get any funding for this yet. We're still seeking funding for it, but we would be looking at things like the challenges that people who stutter face, because when you think about it, we use our voice, we use our language as a way to project who we are and our identities. So if you heard somebody from Newfoundland speaking with a strong Newfoundland accent, you'd be able to identify them as a person from Newfoundland or Labrador. When it comes to stuttering, what the person who stutters isn't entirely in control of how people perceive them, right? So the identity is left up to it's kind of in the ear of the beholder, the ear of the listener. And so there might be times when a person who stutters, their own social identity is at odds with the way people are perceiving them. So that's something that we wanted to tackle in that study. There's a bit of information, a bit of previous research on what's called a concealable and stigmatized identity, and we're looking to bring that framework into this project on sociolinguistic identity and stuttering. So that project will go on. Still an interesting project, and we'll just keep looking for funding and cross our fingers. Something will pop up in the new year.
And you keep saying we. Do you want to elaborate on what the group is that's working on this research with you?
Yeah. So this is the Newfoundland and Labrador Stuttering Association Collaborative, which is a group of people who are joined together for advocacy and research on stuttering in Newfoundland and Labrador. So this includes people like myself, other university students that I work with, that I teach. We have provincial government offices. We have people from the NLSA itself, and we have permission from the school board, the Newfoundland Labrador English School District, as well as Eastern Health, to do research with them. Now we've been working with them previously in a project that we're currently working on, which is the accessibility survey. And so the idea behind that is that we wanted to find out more information about the barriers that exist for people who stutter in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador for seeking therapeutic or clinical services for stuttering. So oftentimes you'll find in rural communities there just isn't the resources available to have a speech language pathologist working within the school, or have them set up in the local health clinic or the hospital, or even in a private clinic. So this disparity in having some of these resources and services available to people in urban centers is an issue for people who aren't able to get into let's say St. John's. They live too far away to make it feasible to drive. So so the survey that we're conducting now is a way to understand what some of these barriers are for those who may be seeking clinical and therapeutic treatment for stuttering. So this is all part of our larger NLSA collaborative, and you can find out more information about the NLSA collaborative at nlsacollaborative.ca.
Paul, would you also provide us any highlights that you've noticed in the podcast this past season?
The moment in some Stutter this year for me for this season, when I think it was Michael and Cameron were talking together, and it was the whole idea that Michael had about setting up I think what he called it was an ambassador, somebody within the school who is there for kids who are facing communication impairments or stuttering specifically. And I just thought of how much of a better world it would be if that was if we had ambassadors like that. And I think he called them Smile I Stutter, or they'd be wearing a pin that says Smile I Stutter. And I just thought of how helpful that would be for students who may be experiencing those issues, but also to kind of just signal to other students that there are people out there to talk to, and it just, to me, it just seemed like something that was a no-brainer, and it's something that we should also be doing here and everywhere. So I thank Michael for that idea, and I hope it works out for him. And I know we're all busy people, but if there was any way any of us could, or even some of the listeners could start a project like that here in Newfoundland and Labrador, that would be an awesome thing to do too.
Paul, in an ideal world, it'd be great that if we could, be able to gain access to schools to meet with the principals, the teachers, guidance counselors, students, and parents to really educate the school system about stuttering and the importance of raising awareness, education, understanding, and acceptance. And but unfortunately, this is a continuing challenge to try to gain access. So I think where we may need to work is to set up an arrangement with the principals to try to gain access to professional development days, and so I think that that would be a sort of an in for us. And so really this would be an opportunity to touch base with the teachers and hopefully something like this as an ambassador structure would be able to be arranged,
Yeah.
Or else, I mean, we could try to have either one teacher or a parent or a student be an ambassador for us.
Yeah,
that's some thoughts.
That's a great idea, and probably maybe what we could do is check in with Michael, let's say next year, and see how things are going on that front too. Maybe he'll have some suggestions about how to approach school boards and school officials to bring a program like that into the school system. Or even his son may have some suggestions on how that might be perceived by other kids at the school too, and whether it's something that would work out, or whether just exactly the logistics of making it work. We could learn a lot from Michael, I think.
Mind, mind to ask you one question related to to concealable stigmatized identity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so so all all phrase it is, Paul. How important do you feel that it it is to obtain funding for this project to support people who stutter?
Getting funding is it's ingrained into the research culture, um, and so the idea behind that is funding can make the research process a little easier. Let's say you can hire research assistants to help you. You can take your findings to conferences if you need to travel to do that. You'll have funding to pay for those travel expenses, and for the most part, it's an assistance issue. So you can hire somebody to help you analyze data, collect data, go into communities and schools that you might not have time, or me as the primary researcher might not have time to go into by myself. So having more people working is always helpful. But I I think projects can go ahead with we have a good group of volunteers, um, and if we have a good group of committed volunteers, lots of work can be done through a research project that way. So uh, it would be nice and it would be helpful and it would look good from inside the academic institution if every single one of your projects received lots of funding. But I think this issue here is such an important one that I wouldn't be limited by not having funding. So I still want to see it happen. I'm still committed to starting and getting the project off the ground. So um, so luckily I have a sabbatical coming up in the fall where I can spend more time um, focusing on the logistics of getting this project started. So exactly how we'd go out and collect data is something we'd have to spend a little more time on, and who finding participants to engage with in the project is something we have to identify too. So who who would we look towards to study? Who's going to be volunteering for our case studies, so to speak? So all of those things they take time, and so again, this is probably why money is a good thing, because you can pay assistants to help work with you to think about these things. But like I said, it's such an important thing. I don't want to see that lost because of something called money. If we can still, I think we can still do it.
Paul, like having the exposure to people who stutter, just listening to the various lived experiences of people who stutter. How important do you feel that this project is to people who stutter?
So you're asking about, do I think it will be useful for people who stutter, whether the effect of doing research could have benefits for people who stutter? I think so. I think there are uh, lots of benefits that can come out of this. For instance, just being able to understand, for us from an academic and scholarly point of view, um, we don't know um, what how language is used by people who stutter to create their identities. There's been a lot of research done in sociolinguistics on language and identity, and um, it goes without saying, I think, that all of these studies have been done on people who are completely fluent, who don't have speech or language disorders or impairments. So our understanding of how language and identity work together is based on only only some of our population. So how do these ideas and these models and these theories about language and identity, how do they work for people who stutter? And we don't have any answers for that right now. So and just understanding the communicative relationship between someone who stutters and the person they're talking to is an issue or an area of research that we don't really have a good understanding. So when it comes to, I'm not going to go so far to say we don't know anything about the social life of people who stutter, but the emphasis of research on stuttering has been on therapeutic outcomes and therapeutic models and theories, and we forget that these are people with social lives. So I think by focusing on the social interactions and the way people who stutter engage in conversations and in social dynamics is something that we can shine a light on, something that we have to do some more thinking and more research about. So I guess in one sense that I'm talking about the benefit it has for scholarly research, but I'll leave that up to you guys to tell me what benefits might come out of a study like this for the individual or the community of people who stutter in Newfoundland and Labrador.
You see, Paul, as a person who has who has a history of trying to hide his stuttering. Mm-hmm. I feel that this project is very important, because I feel that, as if people who stutter try to continue to hide the stuttering, they lose a sense of identity in individuality. It really sort of impacts one's quality of life if a person who stutters is covert. And I also feel that people who are overt stutterers as well, they tend to to avoid some situations, meetings, things like that. So I feel the more research that is done in this area will not only benefit scholars, it will help us as well as people who stutter as well, to understand why why we feel it is so important that to always try to hide one's stuttering. Mm-hmm. And so anyhow, I wish you the best of luck to get the funding, because it is a very vital project.
Right. Well, thanks, Greg. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay.
Sounds good. I hope it gets funded.
I think the biggest thing that we should address is how much Some Stutter Law has grown since it started. So, Greg, if you want to talk about kind of how it started and how much it's grown since then, you want to elaborate on that a little bit, because it's something that we should definitely, it's grown a bunch, so it's something we should definitely talk about.
the history behind this podcast is in 2020 when COVID started. I wanted to do something to support the stuttering community, and I thought about doing a podcast. And to be honest with you, I was very leery about doing a podcast because I wasn't too sure if if I could do it as a person who stutters. And so I started started back then. It was called a people who started have a million things to say, and this was a weekly podcast, and so that went for about a year, and I asked I posted this podcast on the Newfoundland and Labrador Stuttering Association's website, and when I met Dr. De Decker, I had talked to Paul about my desire to expand it to a larger audience, and Paul had informed me that that he had been doing an earlier podcast, and so Paul was willing to work with me, and so he introduced me to Katelyn, my co-host, and then Luca, and and then we started to brainstorm, and some stutter law was born, and so really so we with Katelyn's help, Paul's help, and Lucas, and our two new members, Emily and Melanie. Some stutter was has really expanded a great deal, and the feedback has been excellent, and the audience, the listener audience has really grown significantly, and it's really amazing how we how I guess that Katelyn and I interview use this opportunity to share their own personal lived experiences, and the various other professionals like speech language pathologists, researchers. It is I'm also amazed with how much I'm learning as a person who stutters as well about stuttering, because there's so much to learn about stuttering that in one sense we've only touched the surface of the iceberg, and also what we are doing as a some stutter production team is so important, because we're really laying the foundation of building awareness, education, acceptance of studying through the whole province. So really although we've only started in February or March of this year, we have come a long way, but still a long way to go. Do you have any thoughts, Katelyn?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I hopped on a Zoom call one day and left the Zoom call being the host of a podcast, which was really strange. And even within the first few weeks, we had people reaching out to us saying like, hey, we want to be on your podcast. And we've had some pretty cool guests who've like reached out to us and asked to be on, which is really cool, which means the word is getting out there. And then another thing that's happened since we started is we've been all over the local news. So that's kind of cool. I know myself and Greg and myself and Brent, one of our previous guests, we were on NTV. We've been in the Herald and in the Telegram and on the radio, which is kind of funny. But it's been really great. They've been really supportive in spreading the awareness, which has been really cool to see how that's kind of helped the podcast grow in the province. I've had people come up to me and be like, "Are you that girl with the podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Yeah, so we have had quite a number of interesting guests on, and I feel like we can do like a little bit of a recap, I guess, not of all the guests because we've had a lot, but we'll do a little bit of a recap on some of the guests and some of the main topics that have come from those episodes. So most of our earlier guests were, from Newfoundland, but we kind of branched out after that. I don't know if anybody wants to kind of jump in and say anything that they want to add about any highlights from the different interviews, things that they learned, guests whose interviews really like they enjoyed or something. If you guys want to share that, I have notes that I can share.
As a person who stutters, as as I just said that like I'm learning a great deal about stuttering, and when I think back about my own personal history of when I started to realize that I had a severe stutter, and how I started to avoid stuttering, and then I started to seek out treatment. Back then, the focus was on fluency, and as a person who stutters, I feel fluency really is a bad word, because I think it actually sets up a person who stutters to it may cause more stress trying to be fluent, but I think the trend nowadays is to manage when stuttering. But when I started when I reflect on the various guests, others sharing their lived experiences, people who stutter, the researchers, speech language pathologists, I'm realizing there's been so much focus on the stutter iceberg. Like we actually talk about the tip of the iceberg, which is the blocks, the repetitions, prolongations, which what I'm doing, which is the 10% of the stutter. And then we also talk about the below the surface of the iceberg, which is the emotion component, the embarrassment, the shame, and the the anxiety related to stutter, which often also sort of encourages or sort of encourages and also forces people started to try to hide their stuttering, whether they're overt or covert stutterers. But I'm starting to realize that we're putting a lot of pressure on speech language pathologists to become to enhance their knowledge base about the emotion component. But listening to a few of the guests on our podcast, I realized that it actually takes a village. The old cliche, it actually takes a village to support a person who stutters, which means that now, and I realize that there's a definite need to become more aware of the need for for more of an interdisciplinary approach to treatment and care of people who stutter, which means that we as people who stutter, we go through a lot of anxiety, which affects us in terms of mental health and well-being, affects our physical, uh, which means that it can easily add to depression, physical problems, stomach problems, things like that. That's all anxiety. So I'm realizing more and more that the importance of having like not only speech pathologists to work with us to help managing our stutter, but also to have doctors, researchers, drugs, just to try to, I guess, understand and work with people who stutter. So it's just not a speech language pathologist uh, is not left up to speech language pathologists to work with people who stutter, those who choose therapy. But I feel it is important for the whole team. And really, Katelyn, we interviewed Dr. Joel McGuire on Monday of this week, and you know, really opened my eyes to to more for the need for an interdisciplinary approach. Various professionals coming together to collaborate to help somebody who who stutters. And I'm realizing as well that we also we also talk about we also talked about acceptance of stuttering. And I think the most important thing is that for people stutter is that you know we 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 all have our own definitions of acceptance, but I think we need to understand what's going on inside, and to be able to reach some sense of a comfort level with our stuttering, and then not hide our stuttering. So I think this this is where we need safe people to talk to. This is where we need speech language pathologists, psychiatrists. Like I'm also from the old school as well.
I'm just gonna say, Greg gave an unintentional teaser for next season because Dr. McGuire's episode won't be up until season 2. So everybody stay tuned for a really exciting episode. Dr. Joel McGuire is a really big name in the field of stuttering research, and so that'll be a really exciting episode when that goes up.
So I mean, so when I think back and I mean, and reflect on the various lived experiences of other people who stutter, I'm realizing that speech therapy is important if one chooses therapy, but when all is said and done, we have to reach some degree of of acceptance, and I think this is where we need to once we reach that degree of acceptance. I think we will start the healing process, the recovery process of a good mental health and well-being.
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure. I think that's one. I have a note here next to me of I went through all of the recaps of the episodes, and I picked out the 3 main topics, I guess, of things that we kind of touched on in every episode. And they were acceptance and the emotional component of stuttering and awareness. And so you just hit 2 of them, the acceptance and the emotional component. And I think those are 2 really big ones that have been really important for us to address. And with that, we've also kind of addressed the importance of counseling and psychology and psychotherapy and things like that being implemented into stuttering treatment, which is a really interesting topic for me because that's something that I'm really interested in. So as a student, it's been really cool to interview different researchers. Like we had Dr. Boyle and Dr. McGuire, whose episode will be in season 2. And those have been really great interviews because I'm interested in research. And then also we've interviewed SLPs, which has been really interesting for me personally. Like we had, apparently everybody's named John, but we had John Garson and John Gomez. Those were 2 really great interviews. And we had Kim as well, a bunch of really great interviews with SLPs where I learned a lot about my own kind of ways that I want to practice as an SLP in the future. But the biggest thing is listening to these people who stutter and listening to their personal stories and hearing them talk about the emotional component and their experiences and their levels of acceptance with their stutter. Because as somebody who wants to, work with these people in the future and help them in the most efficient and effective way possible and kind of provide the support that they need most. You can't do that without hearing what they need most. And this is a great platform for me to hear that and talk to them. So that's been really, really cool and a really fantastic learning experience. And there's been, from each guest, I've learned so many different things because they're all very, very different and very different experiences. So like we had guests, we had people who stutter who are in Newfoundland. So I can kind of, understand their stories a little bit more. Like we had Liz and we had Brent. And then we had Michael, who Paul mentioned, and he's in Texas. So that's a way different experience. And so it's been really cool that we've been able to kind of hear from people, I guess, all over North America right now, maybe the world eventually, and kind of hear their stories and their experiences as well. It's an incredible learning opportunity for sure for myself as a student and for any other SLP students and SLPs who have been listening to this, for us to inform our practice. And then we want to step into the awareness side of things. The podcast itself is an incredible awareness piece. And so anybody listening to this from the general public is, being given education and awareness and knowledge and things that they can take with them. But we've also had a lot of people on who have played key roles in promoting awareness, and we talked to them about that. So we had people like Dan Rossi, who's a podcaster, and we had different people who made documentaries. So we had, I have a giant list of names and I'm not even going to be able to remember them all. We had John and Ryan, who both created really wonderful documentaries that helped with stuttering awareness and promoting acceptance of stuttering, and were very widespread and well known and did a lot of great things. Those were mostly in the States, but in Canada as well, and even in Newfoundland. And so we had a lot of people on who talked about the importance of awareness, and also people who helped contribute to that, effort for awareness, which I think is really cool. So those were kind of the three main topics I think that we focused on the most. There's definitely other things, definitely I have a list of things I want to look into. Like I know at one point we talked about bilingualism and stuttering, which was a cool topic, and now I'm like, ooh, I want to go research it. Or like we had some people talk about relationships and dating or parenting, which have all been really cool topics that I know we all want to explore. I want to explore. But I think the three main things that we've been hitting on really hard have been acceptance of stuttering, awareness of stuttering, and the emotional component of stuttering. And I think if anybody's going to take anything away from this podcast, those are kind of the three main things. I don't know if anybody else wants to kind of say their piece now. This hasn't been very conversational, but it's been a lot of talking outwardly. So I don't know if anybody wants to share their thoughts on that as well.
The need for support is very important for people who stutter, and but you see, people who stutter also have have a responsibility to also reach out to to obtain the necessary support in terms of reaching out to share their thoughts, concerns about their stuttering, challenges at work, their personal lives with somebody that they feel safe with, and supportive friends, families. And it is important as well for people who stutter to attend support groups. The Newfoundland Labrador Association hosts a monthly support group for people who stutter, as well as for parents. And so Katelyn, as we discuss, some stutter law will also be putting on in some workshops in season 2, and I think we will have people back like Dr. McGuire and other specialists. And I think that that the more that some stutter can do to really sort of educate the general public, the professionals, the better for the better that we are for raising awareness. And I feel that what some study law is doing, we're also we're also creating a safe place, although it's virtual, for people who stutter to come out and say, yes, I stutter, and these are my lived experiences, because I feel the more that we share our lived experiences, as well as our families as well, and about our experiences, the more that we support and help each other as well. So I feel that some studies really make is making and has made significant strides in building awareness within Newfoundland and Labrador.
Absolutely, yeah. And with every guest we bring on, we're building a community. It's really cool to see. And I mean, I think back, like I've referenced other guests in other episodes because I've heard their stories and then thought, oh, this applies to this person. So it's really cool to kind of see how the web kind of interconnects. Like the one thing I find really funny is, so we did the episode with Ronan and I referenced an article and I couldn't remember the name or the author or anything, but I was referencing a research study that had been done. And then I realized afterwards it had been done by Dr. Boyle, who was on the podcast a couple weeks later. So I find that really funny how everything all kinds of connects, and we're building a community of people who stutter and people who support people who stutter. So it's really, really cool. I don't know if you want to share anything, Luca, behind the scenes, anything fun and exciting that you've learned having to listen and edit and all this stuff. There's definitely some bloopers that come with our recordings. If there's any funny stories, I don't know.
Well, one of the interesting things that I've noticed when listening to the podcast episodes and editing is that a lot of the time there isn't necessarily a very noticeable difference between the disfluencies that people who stutter have and the disfluencies that people who don't stutter have. So for a lot of the guests, if I didn't know beforehand that they were people who stuttered, I wouldn't have been able to tell. And so before starting to work on the podcast, I don't think I've ever met anyone who stuttered before working on the podcast. But now that I've listened to the podcast, I'm wondering, maybe some of them did stutter. Maybe I have met people who stutter, but I just didn't know. And yeah, so I guess working on the podcast and listening to the episodes and editing the episodes has made me more familiar with what stuttering sounds like, whereas before I had no exposure to it whatsoever. So yeah, I guess it's raised awareness not just among podcast listeners, but also me.
Easier to tell when people are hiding it and struggling to hide it.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I've learned learned about myself is we always talk about the lower part of the stuttering iceberg, the below the surface, and how many people deal, I mean, part of stuttering is the anxiety, the depression, the stress, the fears about all of the what I call the secret scaries within all of the emotion component related to stuttering. But I'm learning I feel that often people aren't aware of the severity of the impact of the emotional component the emotional component has on their quality of life. No, so no, I mean, this is the judgment call. Whereas whereas I feel that some people start may be aware of the emotion component, but has chosen to avoid dealing with the emotions, because I feel that for me, for a person to to really to to really acknowledge the emotion component, as well as to try to address it. That can be a frightening place to go, because you're dealing with a lot of history here, a lot of history in terms of what causes people to avoid dealing with the emotions, what causes people to avoid situations. But I think for recovery, I mean, it's important for people who started to really acknowledge this area, and because it does impacts one's quality of life, it impacts one's personal relationships, professionally, personally, affects one's decision making, career choices. So so I find that with me, like for for a number of years, I actually avoided going to that dark place. The secret scaries, I call them. But I find that the more that I'm listening to other people share their own lived experiences, like it's helping me to really to also address these areas, within myself. And I think that it's almost like a cathartic experience, or not perhaps I'm using the wrong word, but it's almost like a healing experience, because I find that what as I mentioned before, some stutter is some stutter has created a safe space for all people who stutter to come, be open and honest, and to to share their own feelings about stuttering. So I think it is a big step for a lot of people here, if that makes sense.
For sure, yeah. I hadn't even really thought about it like this. I mean, I knew there was obviously the emotional component and then the stutter, but it's kind of like there's like almost a double stigma, because we always talk about the stigma attached to stuttering, but there is also a stigma attached to mental health and mental illness. And so if you're a person who stutters and you're already experiencing stigma because of your stutter, and then you want to also seek treatment for a mental illness or a mental health problem, then that's just an added stigma. And I can't even imagine how difficult that would be. And I haven't thought about it like that before, how there's just another layer of stigma associated with living as a person who stutters, which is crazy. But yeah, no, I'm glad that we've been able to create this safe space for people, and even for you, Greg, to kind of continue or start on a healing journey or a path to acceptance, I guess, because we've had people come on the podcast at all different levels. We've had people come on and say they're at, they're a 9 on a scale from 1 to 10 on how much they accept their stutter, and we've had people say that they're like a 3. So we've had people from every different walk come on, and every different place in their journey towards acceptance. And I hope and I think that we've kind of been able to help them move forward on that journey. So one thing I did want to ask, Luca, did you notice when we did the interview with Dan, he complimented our intro music? And I thought, you're never on the podcast, so people probably, if they don't read the little bio, they might not know that it's your own music. So that's kind of cool. Just wanted to throw that out there since you're actually on the podcast right now.
Well, it's a rare opportunity. I come up from behind the scenes.
Yep.
The man behind the curtain.
All right. So is there anything else you wanted to touch on, Greg, before we kind of talk about where we plan to go for the rest of the summer, what we're planning to do, and when we plan to pick up for season 2?
No, I'm fine with that, Katelyn. We also mentioned the possibility of us doing like more of a visual, like a visual, in incorporating that down the road?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have lots of exciting things planned. Right now, we're taking a break after this weekend, a short break for the summer. There is going to be maybe some bonus content coming up throughout the summer, but our official start date for season 2 is tentatively and most likely going to be September 19th. And that's when we'll start up season 2 with regular uploads on Sundays like we've been doing. On top of that, though, there will be some exciting events and things like that. We're looking to try and do some live recordings so that you can actually see our faces, which would be cool, and some different workshops and more interactive things to kind of try and get our guests and our listeners and everybody interacting and sharing their stories and knowledge and just making sure that we're impacting as many people as possible. So we've got lots of exciting plans for that coming up as well.
Well, in closing, some stutter law is an epic project. Is an epic project, and it has been an epic project. And launching and producing of some stutter law takes a lot of commitment, time, tireless effort, and work with a great amount of sincere gratitude and appreciation to the Some Stutter Law production team, our Some Stutter Law guests, and our community listening audience, allies, and friends for your ongoing contributions in supporting Some Stutter Law mission and mandate of raising awareness, education, understanding, and acceptance of stuttering. Without you, there would be no way. Together, we help make life-changing changes for people who stutter, providing better overall health and wellness and quality of life at home, school, work, and within the community of people who stutter and their families. And also a special thank you to the Some Stutter Law production team. The Some Stutter Law production team consists of 6 volunteers: Dr. Paul Decker, Associate Professor of Linguistics at MUN, and 4 MUN students. And I am, out of these 6 volunteers of Some Stutter Law production team, that stutters. So I am the only person that stutters amongst this team. So Dr. Decker, Katelyn, Luca, Emily, and Melanie do not stutter. I am in awe of these 5 individuals that do not stutter, who have taken the time away from their individual, personal, professional, and student lives to volunteer, and I stress volunteer, their services and time to advocate and support the stuttering community and their families in Newfoundland and Labrador. So you were 5 awesome individuals. So thank you very much, production team. So until September, enjoy your summer, take care, and be safe. Thank you all very much.
Some Stutter La, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering, has so much to talk about. Let's start listening.
This has been an episode of Some Stutter La, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering. Some Stutter La is hosted and produced by Greg O'Grady, Katelyn Mayo, Emily Murphy, Melanie Crane, Dr. Paul Decker, and Luca Dinu. Some Stutter La is available on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. You can also check out the Some Stutter La channel on YouTube to ask a question, send us a comment or suggestion, or just to get in touch. Find us online at Some Stutter Podcast on Instagram or Some Stutter La Pod on Facebook. Thanks for listening.